Hello, everyone. Welcome to Parenting Against the Grain again. I'm Amy Webb. I'm the author behind The Thoughtful Parent. I'm sure you guys that are in here all the time know all that already. We have some new people, though, so just in case. Hello. It's Thursday. I hope you're watching. Maybe you're watching this later. And some people, we have members from all over the world, actually. So you might be watching this at another time of day when it's not night. So welcome. Glad. Hopefully, we'll have a few people tune in live, and we'll see if we get any questions. So if you guys are on my email list, which I hope you are, you may have noticed yesterday's email was all about executive function, and I put in there a question like, something like, have you ever, given your kids something to do in the morning while you're getting ready for school, like go put on your shoes or go brush your teeth, and basically you get a blank stare or no comment back. I'm sure that has happened to many of you, as it has to me, and they're just sort of glazed over. So this all relates to executive function, because that right there is a small lapse in executive function. And adults do it too, right? So we do all kinds of things where we kind of space out, or you are so in the habit of doing things a certain way that sometimes you do something out of habit, not thinking about that that's not what you want to do. Maybe you put your taco shells in the freezer, or you put something where it's not supposed to go, and that's a lapse of executive function. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, was executive function. What is it? Why do our kids need it? Why do we need it? So first of all, executive function, just kind of a quick overview. I would imagine most of you know this about executive function, and it's kind of a buzzword nowadays, especially in education. Everybody talks about executive function. There are even apps now that are supposed to help you with executive function. But executive function is just kind of the basic skills, I think, that we use every day to kind of function and get through the world. So things like planning ahead, managing your time, organization, and short-term memory, thinking ahead, things like that most adults have a pretty good grasp on. Although even with adults, we all know people who get everywhere late, and we also ourselves probably have suffered from lapses of executive function. Or this is more common, I think, and I know this about myself as well, we are stronger in one aspect of executive function than another. So maybe we're really good at time management, but we're not good at organization or something like that. And so that's what it's all about, executive function. So with kids, though, it's different, because their executive function skills are still coming online, right? Their little brains are still developing, and they have not yet, usually, especially very young kids, developed a lot of executive function. And so this causes a lot of frustration for us as parents, as you have probably experienced. So for instance, your preschooler is getting ready to go off in the morning to preschool, or whatever you do on a daily basis, maybe just play outside, and you say, okay, honey, it's really cold outside, you need to wear a coat today. And when they get to the door, the coat is not on. So stuff like that. That's a lapse of executive function, because they don't think ahead. So if you tell them that maybe 20 minutes before you're supposed to go outside or leave for school or something, they're not going to remember. And so you usually have to be waiting at the door with the coat, because it will not happen if you don't tell them right before they need to know it. And it does improve as kids get older. I have a 10-year-old, and he has gotten much better. I will say he's not perfect, none of us are, but he'll remember what day he's supposed to bring his musical instrument to school, because they don't have music every day. They only have it certain days a week. So he'll remember stuff like that for the most part. And I usually don't always keep track of that, because he has a different schedule than my younger son with music. And so I don't always know what day who's doing what. So he will keep track of that. So executive function does improve over time, usually. So one thing that brought this to my mind again today was we are very fortunate in our community. We have a big university nearby, and they have a cognitive development lab, which is super cool. For a nerdy research person like me, it's really cool. And I've actually had my kids participate in some of the studies there. So it's pretty fun to go back. It's like going back to grad school. Okay, so I get their newsletter, of course. And so they just sent out a couple of really good resources about executive function and studies that they're doing. And one of the resources they sent out was this really cool TED Talk that one of their professors did all about executive function and what she's finding in her research. And what she's finding is some pretty interesting stuff, and it has a lot to do with how context matters with executive function. So even though in certain situations kids might have really good executive function, other situations, other contexts, and things like who their peer group is can influence how well they exhibit or show executive function. And so I'll put the link in here. You can watch the whole video. It's pretty cool to see what she's learning. But that's also very helpful, I think, for kids and for grown-ups to understand, because I don't know how many times I've experienced this, and you probably have too with your kids, where they do so well at school. They really use those executive function skills at school, like controlling their impulses. When my little one is at school, I've seen him because I volunteer occasionally, and the teachers say, oh, he's so polite and he, listens. He is not like that at home, you guys. Seriously, he will not sit still, listen to a book. He doesn't raise his hand or whatever, and he interrupts, So it's one of those things where context really matters, right? With executive function. When he's at home, he's all relaxed and he's just hanging out with us, and he just feels like, I guess he can let his hair down and he doesn't have to worry about like not interrupting his brother and things like that. Whereas at school, all his peers are all trying to use their best skills for the most part, and the teacher's there watching. And so he sits quietly and listens to the story, and he controls his impulses and all those things. And so if your child does that too, and I have heard this from other parents that, their behavior at school is a lot different than their behavior at home, then that is part of the reason we know now why that is, because of this issue of context. So there you go. Research really can help us from time to time. So in terms of how do we build these skills in our kids, for little kids, there's all these games and things that we can do, and they do help. So the classic ones, and I have an article about this I can post, the classic ones that we always think about are things like Simon Says. And I don't know if you've ever played that game, Spot It, the little card game that has the pictures on it. And the kids have to kind of control the impulse to just pick out the biggest object, because they're all different sizes, and they have to look for objects that match. And so it's actually that game is actually based on a lab study that they used that same type of game to test executive function. So things like that, red light, green light, all the things that we typically do in preschool, those things really do help. I mean, it just takes practice to build executive function skills, and it takes time for those little, brain connections to take hold. And the other thing that this researcher pointed out in the video was a key part of executive function, and this I think relates to older kids, is understanding them and what motivates them and what strategies would help them in particular, practice or, manifest executive function skills. And that goes for us as well. And so, she was saying in the video that you as yourself usually know what kind of things like kind of motivate you. So maybe you're at work and you think, oh, I have to get this big project done, or I have to get this email written, or, some task that has to be done. And sometimes it's hard to stay focused on that, right? It's easy to get distracted. So some people will say like, well, after I get this email written, I'll go get a cup of coffee, or after I get this email written, I'll go take a walk around the block or something. So that's kind of a strategy, that people use. So for like teenagers and like my son who's 10, you have to find what works for them. So maybe, if they're trying to work on homework, they they work for so long, 30 minutes or something, and then they get to take a break and play football, or get to take a break and do something else. So things like that, you have to know each individual person, yourself or your child, and figure out what's going to be the strategy for them that keeps them motivated, keeps them focused, keeps that kind of keyed into that executive function that it takes to stay focused on a task. And that can be challenging and tricky. And the other reason I bring this up is because you've probably seen me posting in the group that this really great executive function summit is coming up, and it starts tomorrow. And it's all online. And the person who is running it is a coach, like a kind of a education coach, and he helps kids build executive function skills. That's one of his specialties. And he also helps kids who have kind of special needs in terms of learning, twice exceptional learners, things like that. So, but I think it could really benefit anybody and any child, because everybody needs help with executive function skills. We can always improve. Our kids can always improve. So that summit starts tomorrow. I'll put the link in here to sign up. It's free. It goes through Sunday, and every day there'll be speakers. The moderator, his name's Seth, he interviews all these awesome speakers. So a couple of my favorites are going to be there, and this is what I'm excited about. And actually, I'm having at least one friend over to watch with me, and we can talk about this in the group if you guys want to. So a couple of my favorites, Stuart Shanker, who, if you're familiar with self-reg, he has the website called self-reg, self-regulation. And so he's one of the speakers, and I've read his work, and he's really has really awesome stuff. And then Debbie Reamer, I think her name is Reber. She does Tilt Parenting, if you've ever heard of the Tilt Parenting podcast, and now she has a book as well. She also is a kind of a specialist in kids who are gifted, have special needs, just are kind of wired differently. Her book is called Wired Differently. So kids who are kind of outside the box. She's a specialist in that kind of area. So she's going to be speaking at this summit. It's one of my blogger friends is going to be speaking at this summit. It's going to be really good stuff. So I hope you guys will tune in, and I hope that we can maybe discuss some of the topics as it goes on. It's Friday through Sunday. It's free. I'll put the link in here. So enjoy that, and I will put all the info in this group. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday, and I will see you next time.